So, good morning everyone. My name is Jelaidin Costan and I am a student of Reading in Philippine History, section EG1. And in the slide, we can see all the members or all the reporters of Group 2 reports, which is Corilanjan Mea, Costan Jelaidin, Dalos Carla Ellen, De la Serna Carl Albert, De Lambaca Ana Ros, Doblen Jesrel Ann, Inabia Frolin Mark, Iskol Christian Kint, and lastly Esma Carmela. So our reports for today is all about the Spanish colonizations to the present, Unit 2. So as we know, Spaniards play on a huge part of the history of the Philippines because we as a Filipino colonized to the Spanish more than about 300 years. So the Spaniards huge influence for the Philippines is different culture, education, and all the different systems of the Philippines. So lesson 1 is chronicles about 16th centuries Filipinos, the first voyage around the world, and the customs of Tagalogs. Introductions. The so-called Age of Explorations and Discovery, which commenced between the 15th and 16th centuries, is considered by the most historians as the turning point in the development of Philippine history. In 1521, Magellan accidentally reached the Philippines, which marked the succeeding expeditions by the subsequent explorers by the conquest of the Philippines, Miguel Lopez de Legazpi, the arrival of Legazpi in 1564, and his effective occupation of Cebu in 1565 started the 330-year rule of Spaniards in the Philippines. So, the lesson hopes to give the students an overview on the various events and turning points which help in shaping the course of the history country. So, the first voyage around the world. So, here we can introduce who are the members of the first voyage around the world with Ferdinand Magellan. So, we have here Antonio Fegapeta. His background is born sometime in the closing year of the 15th century. Parents Giovanni Pigafetta and Angela Soga, the eldest child among his siblings of 2, a native of Vicenza, a town about 100 kilometers west of Venice, Italy. He studied astronomy, geography, and cartography. So, Antonio Fegapeta is an Italian nobleman who sent to Spanish to join the expeditions with Ferdinand Magellan. So, Antonio Fegapeta is a Venetian scholar who joined the expeditions to Spice Island. So, Antonio Fegapeta is a member of a plate of Magellan who aims to travel around the world. He is a Venetian scholar and explorer who joined the expeditions to the Spice Island under the flag of King Charles I of Spain. So, he is Magellan's assistant and he keeps an accurate journal. His journals serve as a primary source of Magellan travel around in the world. So, he is the one of the men who survived the circumnavigations. And Magellan died in Mactan, as we all know. And Antonio Fegapeta, one of the men who survived in the travel in the Philippines where Magellan died in Mactan. So, Antonio Fegapeta assisted Magellan in translating Cebuano language to Antonio Figapeta together with Magellan, reach for the country. They come to the country which is the Philippines. According to the history, they came in March 1521, and upon reaching Cebu, Antonio Figapeta helped Magellan to communicate Cebuanos. So sa pag-adto ni Magellan, or sa pag-abot ni Magellan and Antonio Figapeta to the land of Cebu, Antonio Figapeta assisted Magellan to translate the Cebuano language to Spaniards language. And Antonio Figapeta is recorded document on language all about sa Cebuano. So pag ato nila sa Cebu, they discover, or Antonio Figapeta discovered the new language which is the Cebuano language, and he recorded it to his journal. So one of the 18 men out of 240 who survived in circumnavigation. So si Antonio Figapeta is ika-18 nga tao, or ika-18 nga member ni Magellan nga naka-survive sa circumnavigation sa ilahang voyage sa Philippine. And circumnavigation means they travel around the world to the starting point to the end point. So mao na ang meaning, or unsay pasabot sa circumnavigations. And then in 1522, he joined the expeditions of Juan Sebastian Elcano. So kanang before pa siya ni join kay Juan Sebastian Elcano, Antonio Figapeta joined Ferdinand Magellan to voyage the Philippine for making or sharing their Roman Catholics to the native peoples of Filipino. So in 1519, they start the voyage of Ferdinand Magellan and ended in 1521 in April. And after that, in 1522, he joined the expeditions of Juan Sebastian Elcano, and in Figaveta Journal, Magellan and Juan Elcano's Voyage. So sa journal ni Figapeta, makita nimo dito ang mga events, situations nga ginasulat ni Antonio Figapeta sa iyang journal, which is naga-focus kay Magellan and Juan Elcano's voyage. So the last warship of Italian Navy named after him in 1931. So ang last warship of Italian Navy daw is ginapangalan kay Antonio Figapeta in 1931 to honor him. And then sa akong giingay gana 1519, they are starting the voyage, the first voyage around the world with the expeditions of Ferdinand Magellan, and they lasted with the year of 1522, which is 3 years ang ilahang pag-travel around the world. And Antonio Figapeta rule is to collect data about geography, flora and fauna, climate, and native inhabitants. And while they are traveling, Magellan have a battle in Mactan, Cebu in April 1521. So that time, Antonio Figapeta was wounded in the Battle of Mactan in Cebu in April 1521. And in Antonio's Figapeta's other backgrounds, there is also Francisco Albo, the only other sailor or the last pilot who maintained a journal of Antonio Figapeta. So si Francisco Albo daw is mao daw tong last nga pilot o only sailor o only other sailor daw nga nagtago sa journal, which is the primary source of Antonio Pigafetta. So, when it comes to primary source means that kanang naa siya sa panghitabo, naa siya sa situations, naa siya sa events nga na-record or nasulat sa journal, which is si Antonio Pigafetta. So, while nagsulat siya, nakita niya o kung sa iya mga na-discover sa bawat lugar nga ilahang na-travel. So, proceeding to Ferdinand Magellan, background of Ferdinand Magellan in Portuguese, Fernão de Magallanes in Spanish, or Hernando de Magallanes. So, Ferdinand Magellan was born in 1480 sa Brosa or Porto. Died in April 27, 1521 in the Battle of Mactan, Cebu, Philippines. Portuguese navigator and explorer who sailed under the flags of both Portugal in 1503 to 1513 and Spain in 1519 and 1521. So that day in March 16, 1521, the day of Saturday, they are reaching the Samal. So they reaching Samal to to discover something. So Ferdinand Magellan reached Samal on Saturday, March 16, 1521 after leaving the Canoyas, Landrones, and Marianas. So kani silang tulo nga lugar, si Canoyas, Landrones, and Marianas, same na sila nga lugar, pero lahi-lahi ang gitawag sa iyaha or dagan siya mga nicknames. And kanipod siya nga mga lugar, mao ni siya ang mga tinugurian nga mga mga kawatan nga mga lugar. So sa una pa nga wala pa ni adto si Magellan, kanigid siya nga lugar, mao ni siya ang kanang mga taang nagpuyo ani nga mga tao is mga kanang mga kawatan nga bisag unsa na lang, it involves sa pagkaon na ba, sa ganang pag-cultivate na ba sa ilahang mga ari-arian and other so in March 17 in Homono or Homonhon in Barangay Ganyan, Eastern Samar, Ferdinand Magellan reached with his plate member in Homonhon, and they offer not war but also a true religion or sharing their religion to the native of people in the Homonhon. So Ferdinand Magellan in the same day of March 17, he visited the ships of Suluan. So ships of Suluan is katong mga leaders nga maoy as a president or himuog ganang punong barangay ba, or as a kung kuanjud president, maoy taga mando, maoy taga kanang hatag og mga mga sugo sa ilahang mga kanang mga members or sa ilahang kagrupo. So that day, Ferdinand Magellan visited the ships of Suluan, Inaruyan, Limbas, Bukad, Layong, Kalipay, Badjao, Kaboling, and Dato Garas-Garas. So, while he traveling to Hubonhon, Ferdinand Magellan traveled to Suluan to 20 kilometers from east of Homonhon. So, Magellan bringing the name of King Charles I, the true religion, and causes no harm. So, sa ako pang ingon kaganina nga pag-adto nila, pag-abot nila sa Homonhon, they give the native people not a war but also a true religion, which is the Roman Catholic or the Christianism. So So, Homonhon was called by Magellan as Nueva Providencia. So, that time nga naadto si Magellan sa Suluan, iyahang gidala ang pangalan ni King Charles para motuo ang mga tao sa Suluan. So, naingan siya ngadto nga, I am here to honor of King Charles and I am offering you a religion and not causing you any harm or any harm to anybody. So, while after he said that, the people of Suluan receive and accept their offer, which is the religion of Roman Catholic or Christianism. So, after that time, the Homonhon was called by Magellan as a Nueva Providencia. So, on March 19, Dato Garas-Garas, Irayunan and other entered a treaty of friendship with Don Hernando Magallanes. So, entered a treaty of friendship means nagipagsundo or nakipag-ugnayan sila nga kanang they are not Ferdinand Magellan didn't come in the Suluan to have a war, but have a war kanang tugani wala sila na ato dito para makipag kanang away, makipag-bakbakan sa mga kanang pagpatay sa mga tao sa Suluan, which is nato si Ferdinand Magellan with his plate member kay tungod ilang gi-offer ang true religion sa mga native people sa Homonhon, and the native people of Suluan treat them as a friend, and same as to Ferdinand Magellan. So, Don Hernando Magallanes is also Ferdinand Magellan. In ang kanayang pangalan Don Fernando Magallanes kay translating to Spanish language, or mao na iyang pangalan sa Spanish. And then in Antonio Pigapetta stated that they stayed 8 days in Homonhon. So, pag adto nila Ferdinand Magellan sa Homonhon, nag-record po si Antonio Pigapetta sa iyang journal nga nag-stay daw sila dito 8 days sa Homonhon. Then, while they are staying in Homonhon, nagka-problema sila sa pag-secure sa ilahang food. So, that time of having a difficulty of securing food, the Homonhon people or the Homonhon native people offered them food, but it's not enough. Kay, di ba, sa giingon kagana sa other slide is 240 members. Apil na dito si Ferdinand Magellan sa ilahang pag-voyage around the world. So, while they are reached the Homonhon, ang ilahang mga pagkaon is dili igo para sa ilaha. So, the native people offered them, but in reality, dili gahapon igo or dili gahapon maabot sa pila ka adlaw ang ilahang pagkaon tungod sa ilahang kadaghanon nga mga members sa pag-travel. So that time kay nagkalisod man sila sa pag-secure sa ilang mga pagkaon, they traveled in March 25 in Limasawa. So, ni-travel na po sila to another place, which is the Limasawa, and they reach it in March 25, and they meet Raha Kalambo and Raha Shago. So, pag adto nila sa Limasawa, nakabutang sa journal ni Pigapetta na ang island daw sa Limasawa or ang mga taod nga dito is naa daw sila yung mga dogs, cats, hogs, goats, and fowls. So, kaning hogs, mao ni siya ang mga baboy nga gina-slaughter bitaw ginaihaw para makaon sa mga tao, and kani pong mga fowls mao ni siyang chicken, rooster, hen, and other types of chicken nga pwede makaon. So, they were cultivating rice, mais, breadfruit, and had also coconuts, oranges, banana, citron, and ginger. So, kay ang tumong po sa pinakauna pa lang, ang tumong pa lang gid nila Magellan sa pag-travel nila ay sa pag-voyage nila around the world is to kanang share their tawag ani kaning to colonize differentiations of culture, educations, and different system of history. So kay pag-abot nila sa Limasawa, kay nakita natinga sila kay nganong naana sila yung mga na-cultivate na mga animals and foods. So sa base din sa kay Figapetas Journal, dili sila mismo ang una nga naka-colonize sa mga native people sa Limasawa, which is naada ay mga other countries nga naga-colonize adisir pa ni abot ang Spaniards. So ginaingon dinhi nga ang native na aday mga hayop na ay mga fruits. So na sila makaon. So wala pa ni abot ang Spaniards na nay mga makaon ang mga taga-native sa Limasawa. So Pigafetta tell how he visited one of the chieftains at his home on the shore. The house was built raised on a post and thatched. Pigafetta thought it looked like a haystack. So natal pod or nasulat pod o na-record pod ni Pigafetta nga pag visit daw nila sa Limasawa, nakita daw sila sa mga balay sa mga native people nga ang ilahang balay is gikan sa hay. Ang kanisiyang hay mao ni siya ang mga sagbot kung ibutang nato more bitaw siya og kanabitaw mga sagbot na sa kanang more siya mga palay nga nga uga or dry leaves of kanang sa mga palay nga uga nga ilahang gi kanang ilaha bitong gi pangtipok, and then ilahang gi pang sa pagtipok nila na ugan naman to. So mao na to ilang nahimo nga balay. They built a house raised on posts attached. So ilahang gibuhat na nga balay, ilahang gi-build na nga balay para ma-secure sila, and then kanabod siya nga balay is built on haystack. So more siya og bahay kubo, but not unfortunately nga bahay kubo gid siya, kay ang bahay kubo is naabay mga kahoy. So ang kaning haystack is all about gid siya sa kanang mga sagbot nga nangauga nga ilahang gibuild as a house. So in Figapetta's journal, it had been the day of San Lazarus when Spaniards first reached this island. So sa akong giingon pa kaganina, dili gid mismo ang Spaniards ang una nga naka-colonize sa Limasawa, which is which is si San Lazarus. So by the Spaniards reached this island, Magellan gave to the group the name of Archipelago of Saint Lazarus. Kay tungod iyahan ning giname, iyan ning gihatagan og pangalan kay tungod si San Lazarus maoy una nga naka-travel or naka-adto sa lugar sa Limasawa. So Archipelago of Saint Lazarus, the name under which the Philippines were frequently described in the early writings, although another title is the Islas de Poniente, or Islands of the West, was more common up to the time when the title Filipinas became fixed. So and another slide we have here in Figapetta's journal, Magellan in Cebu in April 7, 1521. A junk from Sham. Sham, it means Thailand. It's because ang pangalan sa una sa Thailand is Sham Paman. So gireform sila nila ang Sham nga, or ilang rename ang Sham as a Thailand in 1931. In 1932. So a junk from Thailand was anchored at Cebu when Magellan ships arrived there, and he's together with the knowledge that Filipinos showed off to the surrounding countries, including China on the one side and the Moluccas on the other side, is evidence of the extensive trade relations at the time of the discovery. So way back sa slide or sa akong gisulti kaganina nga dito sa Limasawa Island, dili gid mismo ang mga Spaniards ang una nga naka-travel or ang una nga naga-voyage sa kadtong island, which is the Limasawa. So napaday uban countries, which is the China. So na-include na dito ang China, ang Moluccas nga naga-travel pod og naga-trade pod og relationship sa native people of Limasawa. And that time Antonio Figapita discovered it with his commander Ferdinand Magellan. And Cebu was a large town, and it was reported that more than 2,000 warriors with their lances appeared to resist the landing of Spaniard, but assurances of friendliness finally won the Cebuanos, and Magellan formed a compact with Dato of Cebu, whose name was Hamalbar, identified in Philippine history today as Raha Humabon. So while Magellan reached the Cebu in April 751, naadto sila sa large town daw sa Cebu, and it was reported daw nga na ay mga warriors nga naglances or ni appeared sa mga Spaniards. So that time daw sa year 1521 na nagdiha ang Battle of Mactan, Cebu, which is diha pod namatay si Ferdinand Magellan. So before that happened, the friendliness daw, the treaty of friendliness is finally won on the Cebuanos. So naghapoy nakamit si Magellan after siya namatay, no, ang paghatag og blood compact sa Dato of Cebu, which is si Hamalbar, or ginatawag nila karon as Raha Humabon. And so that time po, no, so that time gyud nga kuan nga kanang bisan pa og kanang namatay si Magellan sa Mactan, Cebu, as long as ang iyang purpose sa pag-adto dito is nakamit gihapon niya. So kadtupod nga time nga namatay si Ferdinand Magellan, si Antonio Figapeta pod is nasamdan siya ato. It was wounded, and he came back to the Spain in 1521 and he joined the expedition of Juan Sebastian Elcano. So kadto na pod dito na din nga time nga namatay si Ferdinand Magellan in April 27, 1521, and Antonio Figapeta's journal, the primary sources of the reference of getting the data or collecting the data is already passing to the Spanish or the Spain, which is ang history nato is mas malocate pa jud nato tungod kay Antonio Figapeta's journals. So kay ang purpose man ni Antonio Figapeta sa pag-join niya sa Spain is to collect data. So mabalaan jud nato kung unsay mga sources nga unsay nahitabo sa atong history, ug unsa pod ang ato ang mga kailangan ibalaan all about sa atong history. So this is all my presentations, and the other member, which is Colonel de la Serna, will be present his part of the reporting.
Juan de Plasencia, Customs of Tagalog. Juan de Plasencia and his background. Juan de Plasencia was a Franciscan friar from Extremadura, Spain. He arrived in the Philippines in 1578 as part of the first batch of missionaries. He served in various missions areas in Luzon, including Laguna, Quezon, Bulacan, and Rizal. He became the custos or superior of the Franciscans in the Philippines from 1584 to 1588. He authored the book Customs of Tagalog, which provides a valuable insight into the culture and tradition of the Tagalog people during the Spanish colonial period. As a religious missionary, he lived a life of poverty and devoted his time to preaching and helping poor. He passed away in Laguna in 1590. Background of the document. This document is the Customs of Tagalog. The Costumbres de los Tagalos is historical account written by Plasencia in 1589. It was one of main accounts written during the early years of Spanish occupation in the Philippines. Its purpose was to help the colonizers understand and describe the native population. Plasencia collected information from elderly individuals and those he deemed knowledgeable. The account covers native practice such as government, justice, inheritance, slaves, and dowries. Plasencia's task was to provide observations to aid colonizers in effectively dealing with the natives. Excerpts taken from the document. So when we say excerpt is, for example, movie, ay book. Ay book nga isa ka book. Tapos na isa ka director nga magplano og magkuhag isa ka chapter sa book nya himo og movie. So katong movie is excerpt lang siya sa book. Mo nang excerpt part lang siya sa whole document. So kibali sa document ay part dito nga kuhaon lang siya. Mo nang excerpt. So on the government and social organization, the Tagalogs were ruled by chiefs called datus, who were revered and obeyed by their people. The community was referred to as barangay, consisting of 30 to 100 families. The nobles called maharlikas were required to accompany the datu in times of war and were exempt from taxes and tributes. The commoners were known as aliping namamahay and were allowed to live in their own houses while serving their masters. Slaves called aliping sa gigiler or gigilid were captives in war who lived in their master and could be sold along with their children. If they possessed gold beyond their values as a slave, they could ransom themselves and become an namamahay. A confusion between the terms aliping namamahay and aliping sa gigiler existed, which led to some being classed as slaves when they were not. The aliping sa gigiler could be transferred to another barangay through inheritance, but they and their master had to remain in the same village. So daya is nadiri ang social class sa Philippines sa una. Ang datus, slaves, nga gitawag og aliping sa agigiler, commoners nga gitawag og aliping namamahay. On marriage, so diri adin ana ko nabasahon, explain na lang ko ning mga situation. So diri kaning on marriage is this article kaning article is nagdiscuss sa various situation regarding sa marriage among different social class. So ang maharlikas nga mag-marry og slave is naay possibility nga mawala ang ilang status. But if ang ilang anak naa sila'y anak sa slave, the children and their mother could be considered free men. Mato siya. So, if a free woman had children by slave, the children would be regarded as free men. Children of a maharlika and a slave would be classified based on their birth order. So, if odd ang birth order, inherit ang mother's status. So, if even, inherit ang father's status. So, example, tulo ang anak, add mo na siya. So, ang i-inherit na ang mother status. So, kung upat ang anak, which is even number, i-inherit ang father status. On loans, the debtors were condemned to a life of toil because of the excessive interest added to their debts. As a result, debtors were plugged into difficulty until they become slaves together with their children. In order to earn a living, sometimes their debt was sold to other people, so the debtor had to pay more debt and had to experience an increasingly pitiful state. So the beginning article is harsh consequences of excessive interest on loans, which led debtors into a life of toil and eventually slavery, along with their children's. So ang debtors is i-force sila to sell their debt to increasingly difficult situation. On inheritance, legitimate children had equal rights to inherit, but sometimes parents showed favoritism by giving more to a child. The dowry given to a son to marry the datu's daughter was not included in inheritance. Property given by parents to children was not considered inheritance unless declared as a necessity. If a man had a children with his slave, their children would not inherit anything. A man's child from another woman would inherit everything if there was no legitimate child. If the man died without an heir, the inheritance would go to his parents, grandparents, or closest relative. On inheritance of adopted children, the adopted child could inherit twice of the amount paid in his adoption. For example, if 1 tael of gold was paid upon a child's adoption, he should be given 2 taels of inheritance by adopting parents. Thereafter, children whose father died before the adoption could not inherit anything from the adopting parents. The rule was simple. The arrangement on inheritance stopped at the death of their biological fathers. So there is the adopted child could inherit twice the amount paid in adoption, but if mapatay ang father niya, the child could not inherit anything from the adopting parents. Kay based sa rule, the inheritance arrangement only applied until the biological father's death. On investigation and punishment, the Filipino had system of resolving disputes through arbitration, with litigants choosing an arbiter known for his fairness and justice. Offenses were punished through fines or served until payment was made, with slaves being made through death or punishment for the crimes of their chiefs, wives, or daughters with death, and riches with recompense and enslavement of their children. So the punishment is fines og servitude, pero wala ang punishment until payment was made. So on marriage dowries, in the past, men gave dowries to the parents of the woman they were marrying if the parents were alive. They could enjoy the dowry given to them. If the wife did not have living parents or grandparents, she would enjoy the dowry herself. Unmarried women were not allowed to own property, as their labor was considered devotion to their parents. Sons would receive half of the dowry they should give to their brides from their fathers when they were about to get married. Failure to provide dowries would result a fine, which varied depending on the practice of the barangays or the individual wealth. The heaviest fine was imposed when the groom or the bride withdrew from the pre-arranged marriage and the dowry had to be returned. The fine was severe if the parents of the bride were alive, as it was thought that they wanted their daughter to marry for financial gain. So when we say dowry, dowry is property. So when we say dowries is property or money brought by a bride to her husband on their marriage. On divorce. Prior to the arrival of the Spaniards, divorce was allowed in pre-colonial Philippines. There were certain grounds for divorce, such as when a wife left her husband before giving birth to a child to marry another man. The entire dowry would go to the husband. If the husband left his wife, he would lose his If the husband left his wife, he would lose his half of the dowry. If the couple had a child, the entire dowry and fine would go to the child and would be taken care of by the grandparents or close relatives. If their spouse died, half of the dowry would be returned to their respective relatives. So if mag-divorce ang mag-asawa, such as kung ang wife is biyaan niya ang iyang husband before giving birth to child, the entire dowry would go to the husband. So pero if ang husband ang left his wife, biyaan niya ang wife, he would lose only half of the dowry. Worship of the Tagalogs, their gods and their burials. The worship of Tagalogs, their gods, their burials and superstitious. On the worship practices of Tagalogs, Pasensya observed that there were no temples performing sacrifice or adoring idols in pre-colonial Philippines. They also constructed temporary shed on each side of the house, called CB, to shelter the assembled people. The house was decorated with small lamps and large lamp adorned with leaves of the white palm, while drums of various size were played successively during the 4 days feast. On the Tagalog deities, pre-colonial Filipinos had many idols and worshipped the sun, the moon, and the stars. They had an idol called Badhala that they especially worship, as well as idols called Likha with different shapes. They also worship dead men who were brave in war and had special faculties, and had idols for various aspects of life, such as Dian for love and generation, and Lakapati and Idayanale for agriculture. They also paid reverence to the water lizards called boya or crocodiles, out of fear being harmed by them, and could even offer them portion of what they carried in their boats. So, ang Tagalog deities, daghan ka sila worship, including ang sun, ang moon, ug ang stars, ug napay Bathala, Likha, Tiyan Masalanta, Lakapati, Idayanale. On their superstitious beliefs, the pre-colonial Filipinos had various superstitions and beliefs. They worship idols such as on their knowledge of time. Before the arrival of the Spaniards, the natives had now established divisions of years, months, and days. They determined time by the cultivation of the soil, their counting by the moons, and the different effect produced upon the trees, yielding flowers, fruits, leaves. So, very nice kayo kay wala pa calendar sa una. So, magbase sila sa time or years kaysa cultivation of soil. Yeah, count, mag-ihap sila sa moon. Pila na ka moon ang niagi. Pila na ka adlaw. Unya, ang effect produced upon the trees when yielding flowers, fruits, leaves. Di ba nice? On their sacrifice and other forms of idolatries, the natives' way of offering sacrifice involved proclaiming a feast and offering food to their idol while an officiating priest. So, mo lagi ni sa mga Filipino is always mag-offer yung food sa mga idolatries. The participants respond with their own prayers, and ceremony usually ends with them becoming intoxicated. Un priest of the devil. So, on the priest of the devil. So, dariya is na ay kuan ni na ay 12 ka types of priest. So, kani is muna sila ang spiritual figures that were believed to have existed among the natives of Filipino, particularly during the Spanish colonial period. However, it is important to note that these descriptions may not accurately reflect the beliefs and practices of all indigenous communities in the region. On the belief on death and other associated rituals, the Tagalogs had a custom of burying the dead beside their house, or if the deceased was a chief, beneath a little house or porch. The body was laid on the boat, serving as a coffin or bier, and various animals were placed inside the boat to serve as rowers. Mourning for the dead lasted 4 days, and the grief was accompanied by eating and drinking. The Aitas or Negrilos had a different form of burial where they dug a deep perpendicular hole and placed the deceased within the upright with their head or crown unburied. They also believe in an afterlife called Maka for the just and valiant, and a place of punishment called Kasaman for the weak. The Spanish missionary Plasencia noted thanks to the preaching of the Holy Gospel, Tagalog had abandoned this practice. So there is a mga Tagalog had a custom of ilubong nila ang dead beside their house or beneath little house or porch. Then ang uban pod is sa boat nya magbutang sila og animals which is mag-represent og rowers or tig paddle sa tig rowers. So that's all sa customs of Tagalog.
Good day everyone, my name is Jessel Andublin. Today I am going to report about the Kartilya ng Katipunan. The first that I will be discussing today is the introduction. The colonial period was a harsh phenomenon that compelled an opportunity for the Filipinos to act in solidarity towards sovereignty. It was the regime which caused Andres Bonifacio to organize the Katipunan on July 7, 1892. Obliged by the defunct of Rizal's La Liga Filipina and the absence of hope on the reform movement, Bonifacio had to make options in order to achieve the freedom dreamed by the whole nation. So it was Andres Bonifacio who first formulated a code of conduct and to whom the Decalogo ng Katipunan was attributed. Cartilla was longer more literary and philosophical. It presented its concepts of virtuous living as lesson for its self-reflection, rather than as direct prescription. It asserted that it was the internal, not the external qualification that makes human greatness. With the hope of instilling order and respect among its members, the Katipunan introduced a set of guiding principles and teaching to its author, Emilio Jacinto. The important for its members was cognizance of katwiran and kaliwanagan. The existence of the Cartilla proved the correctitude and adherence of the Filipino to establish principles and their merit for the regard of humanity. The author and his backgrounds. Ever since the authorship of the Cartilla has been ascribed to Emilio Jacinto, the young advisor of Andres Bonifacio and the so-called brain of Katipunan, due to his brilliance, he rose from the position of fiscal to rank of a general in the underground movement. Under the leadership of Supremo, he served as intelligence director in the assault made in San Juan del Monte, August 1896. In order to seize a Spanish garrison in the area, his friendship with Bonifacio allowed him to naturally provide the latter with weapons and ammunition, money printing materials, and artistic creations. Filipinos in History 1995. So for the Katipunan leadership such as Emilio Jacinto, the ideas of right and light, katwiran and kaliwanagan were of utmost importance. They saw themselves as not only as inheritors of the age of enlightenment, but intellectual and moral and revolutionaries, fighting to create and define a nation and culture that was post-enlightenment. There was no longer shackled by the ideological and colonial restraints of the West, but a country that adopted and merged the best of Spain, the United States, France, and our unique culture and society in support of being Filipino. In spite of his failure to finish a university degree, Emilio Jacinto was a man of intellect, refinement, and literary indulgence. He wrote Liwanag at Dilim, which contains some essays about his political and social philosophies. Included in his collection were the essays Sa Anak ng Bayan, Ang Ningning at Ang Liwanag, Kalayaan, Ang Tao'y Magkakapantay, Ang Bayan at Ang Pinuno, ang Maling Pagsampalataya. In the hills of Majayjay, Laguna, where he set up his secret headquarters, he contracted malaria, which became the cause of his death of April 6, 1899, at the age of 24, Filipino History, 1995. This is the photo of Emilio Jacinto courtesy of Ambet Campo.
Good day everyone, I'm Frolin McGinabia from BSHM, and for today's video I will discuss the lesson 2 is all about Cartilla ng Katipunan. The Cartilla is a primary source which contains the oaths and the order the Katipuneros had to follow. According to the British scholar Jim Richardson, 2013, the Cartilla was sold for the full quota per copy, although it was not clear whether the members were responsible to the payment of their respective chapters. Richardson suspects that the Cartilla was still used at the time of the revolution against the United States, as the evidenced by General Artemio Ricarte in 1899. Richardson also relates the story that Emilio Jacinto Cartilla was seen as the superior by the Andres Bonifacio, who had intended of his decalogue to be polished and distributed to the new members. The two documents he posits, however, are different from one another because Jacinto Cartilla expound aspiration, and moral values, while that the Bonifacio enumerate the duties of Tipuñeros. The criteria resonate the teaching of discipline, virtue, moral, to the individual who wish to join the secret society. It's established of the foundation that would govern the affair of the Katipunan and its members. Anyone who violate the teaching would be punished in accordance with the gradation of the offense.
The Declaration of the Philippine Independence. Introduction. After the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, the American Naval Squadron in Hong Kong was instructed by the Secretary of the Navy to come to the Philippines in order to challenge and destroy the Spanish fleet. Though outnumbered by the Spanish fleet, the American squadron was able to defeat them. Poorly armed Spanish ships by midday. The Spanish fleet would be brought to a complete destruction. Eventually, the Spanish in the Cavite hoisted a white flag as a sign of surrender in the face of humiliating defeat. Emilio Aguinaldo A. Fami, who had become the president of the newly established dictatorial government. He was born on March 22, 1869 in Kawit, Cavite. Died on February 6, 1964 in Quezon City. He was a Filipino politician and military leader who played an important role in Philippine Revolution. He was the youngest and first president of the Philippines. Emilio Aguinaldo, who had become the president of the newly established dictatorial government, planned to proclaim independence in order to inspire his forces to fight the Spaniards and to lay down the basis through which other countries would recognize the independence of the country. The proclamation was made on June 12, 1898 in Cavite, El Vejo, now known as Cavite. On that day, the prominent leaders of the revolution who gathered in the house of Aguinaldo proclaimed independence and conferred upon him numerous powers in order to direct thoroughly the affairs of the government. Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, born on December 7, 1830, died December 4, 1903. He finished a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Santo Tomas, distant relative of Rizal, was popular among peasants as Don Bosyong. He died from a fatal fall from a horse-drawn carriage at the age of 72. Advisor of Emilio Aguinaldo, penned and read the declaration during the June 12, 1898 in Kawit, Cavite. The Acta de Proclamación de la Independencia del Pueblo Filipino, as the document is aptly called, was penned and read by Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista before the presence of the thousands of people from the various provinces. The flag, which was made in Hong Kong, was hoisted and waved for the first time, and the music of what would become as the Philippine national anthem was played likewise for the first time. Julian Felipe, the composer, was instructed that the anthem should sound like a march and exuberant of triumph, that it should be expressive of a gratitude for the contribution of Spain in the Philippines, and that it should symbolize the determination of the country and its love for freedom. The title was Marcha Nacional Filipina, Philippine National March in English, and commonly and informally known by its incipit Bayang Magiliw, Beloved Country, is the national anthem of the Philippines. The purpose of declaration: to proclaim the sovereignty and independence of the Philippines from colonial rule of the Spanish Empire. and the 333 years of Spanish colonizations. Signatories, the document was signed by 98 delegates. 97 people are pure Filipino and one is the U.S. Army officer who witnessed the declaration, USA, Mr. L.M. Johnson, a colonel of artillery. Things we should do. Let us value our freedom and give importance to our sovereignty. Let us value the freedom and appreciate the people who risked and paid their life for this. Let us give honor to our heroes by remembering them and their sacrifices for our freedom.
The Malulus Constitution and the First Philippines Republic. The Malulus Constitution, written by the Congress, was proclaimed on January 22, 1899, creating what is known today as the First Philippine Republic, with Aguinaldo as its president. The Constitution was approved by the delegates to the Malulus Congress on January 20, 1899, and sanctioned by Aguinaldo the next day. In 1896, the Philippine Revolution began against Spanish colonial rule. In 1897, Philippine forces led by Aguinaldo signed a ceasefire with the Spanish authorities, and Aguinaldo and other leaders went into exile in the Hong Kong. In April 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out. The U.S. Navy's Asiatic Squadron, then in Hong Kong, sailed to the Philippines to engage the Spanish naval forces on May 1, 1898. The U.S. Navy decisively defeated the Spanish Navy in the Battle of the Manila Bay. The convention had early elected Aguinaldo president on January 1, 1899, leading to this inauguration on January 23. Parts of the Constitution gave Aguinaldo the power to rule by the decree. The Constitution was titled Constitution Politica and was written in Spanish. In 1899, the Malulus Constitution, the first Philippine Constitution, the first Republican Constitution in Asia, was drafted and adopted by the Philippines Republic, which lasted from 1899 to 1901. During the American occupation, the Philippines was governed by the laws of the United States of America. It is anchored in democratic tradition that ultimately had their roots in American soil. It created a Filipino state whose government was popular, representative, and responsible, with three distinct branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The act of patriotism and feeling patriotic are things which will make for a stronger nation. Not only will you be able to relate with the others in your shared love for the countries, but the more individuals who express their patriotic feelings, the stronger our country will be as a whole. And so patriotism means that we love and cherish our fellow Filipinos. We admire this, encourage their diligency, their patience, their peaceful and law-abiding nature, their hospitality, their kindness. We feel a terrible pain when Filipinos are accused of indolence, indifferences, smugness, and complacency.
Good day everyone. I am the reporter of Unit 2 Lesson 5, which is the visual sources in the study of history. Beyond the usual documents, napakalaking halaga ng mga visual materials sa pag-aaral ng kasaysayan. Maliban sa pagiging artists nila, maaari silang kapulutan ng mga sumusunod. Number 1, worldview. Pananaw sa mundo ng artist at nung mismong singing. Number 2, ways of life. Kung paano sila namuhay noon or paano sila nag-i-exist during that time. Magre-reflect ito sa mga painting, sa mga lumang larawan. Gayon din ang number 3, which is culture. Maaari nating gamitin na mga material na to explain ano yung mga norms nung panahon nila. And lastly, sila ay pieces of evidence ng isang bahagi ng nakaraan. So, lo and behold, sila ay may taglay na truth value regardless of what kind of material it is. Gustuhin man natin ang art o hindi, nandyan siya. In reading and understanding visual sources, marami tayong pwedeng pagpipilian. Ilan sa mga ito kagaya ng photographs, paintings, cartoons, videos, documentaries, footages, sketches, posters, advertisement, painting, and sculpture. Sa sobrang dami nating pwedeng maging choices sa pag-aaral natin ng kasaysayan on visual way. Visual materials must be seen by the historian as a valuable historical source, contextualization, piece of the past, reinforcement of evidences, proper equipment to interpret this properly. And of course, sa paggamit natin ng mga ito, napakahalaga ng mga rule ng historian kasi marami siyang pwedeng paggamitan ng visual materials. Pwede siyang historical sources dahil una, it allows the historian to find the context. Pag sinabi nating context, nagkakaroon tayo ng chance alamin ano yung nangyayari nung panahong iyon. Halimbawa, ano yung available na painting or available na painting materials. Gaya ng aking sinabi, it's a piece of the past pag nakakahanap ang mga historia ng mga lumang sketches. Isa sa mga unang pwedeng pumasok sa isip nila ay, totoo kaya nag-i-exist tong tao na to? May model kaya na ganito or ano yung intention ng artist sa paglikha ng sketch na to? Furthermore, it reinforces evidences. Ito yung nagpapatunay sa mga widely held na mga kaalaman tungkol sa nakaraan. Nandito na tayo sa part kung saan bibigyan ko kayo ng basic guides kung paano gamitin ang mga materials na ito. So, first one, on the question of subject. So, dito alamin natin kung ano yung nandoon, sino yung nandoon, o bakit yun nandun. Ano yung laman ng art material? Hayagan ba ito, concealed ba? May malalim bang meaning o nakadepende doon sa ating pag-assess doon sa material? Next, on the question of fact. So, sa pagtatanong natin dun sa isa, sa question of subject, pwede din nating sunod itanong na the context sa piece of fact, yun bang nakita kong material, drawing, painting, sketch, yun ba mismo nagsasabi ng fact or kailangan pa itong i-interpret or yun na yun mismo? Next, on the question of intended observers or audience. Siyempre, questionin din natin para kanino siya ginawa. Aim ba tong artist na makita itong isang particular na grupo ng tao or exclusive ba siya sa isang set ng audience? Kung gayon doon na lang natin pwedeng balikan yung subject kaya siguro ganito ang paint niya. Halimbawa, si Juan Luna. Para kanino kaya yung paintings na drawing niya? Diba ano yung intentions for creating such paintings? So next, on the question of purpose. Why was the materials created or produced? Who is the artist or photographer and what was the intention? So, magkadugtong sila ng question ng intended observer or audience. Pwede nating alamin o tungkuyin sino dapat yung magko-consume ng material and for what purpose. Next, on the question of context. Siyempre, kailangan nating alamin yung time, yung space, yung practices nung panahon na yon. And in terms of value, how important visual sources to help us understand the time that we're trying to study. Now, let us try to distinguish each of the visual sources from one another. For example, number 1, which is photograph. It captures a minute part of reality in an exact yet still form. So, kumbaga, sa pagkuha mo ng picture na para kang nag-screenshot ng isang live stream, yun yung nangyayari at the moment, and yun ebidensya ng particular na moment na yun. So, syempre, photographs are considered objectives reproduction of reality. Next, painting. Ang painting naman ay imitation ng reality, or pwede ding hindi kasi nga abstract painting din, 'di ba? Or di kaya may mga painting na na-reimagine na realistic yung style pero yung characters involved ay hindi naman talaga part noon. Next ay caricature. Caricature o yung mga political cartoons. Ito naman, they are opinions about our reality, so they represent a part of reality in a seemingly exaggerated form. So, syempre, hindi sila realistic, no approach. Yung approach nila in terms of visual. However, yung purpose din kasi, may goal sila to be sarcastic or to be funny. And lastly, video documental. So, syempre, ito naman ay moving picture. Kaya nga ang tawag sa mga pelikula noon ay motion picture kasi ano sila, slideshows lang sila. Pero syempre ngayon, meron na tayong technology. They are audiovisual materials that they effectively represent historical past. So, sa pagbi-video documentary, akala ng lahat dito, mas mataas yung accuracy. Mas mataas yung accuracy niya kasi hindi lang siya visual material. Hindi lang din siya audio material. Meron na kasing intervention dito ng expert na nasala na sa pagbi-video documentary. Now, let's examine two specific types of the use of virtual sources. They actually three, pero we will begin the political cartoons. A political cartoon is an illustration that translates editorial themes into satirical, sarcastic, or burlesque connotation, which the typical view of arousing the attention of authorities and institutions. So, political cartoons are way different because they tend to be editorial, very opinionated siya. This cartoon revealed the popular perception of societies concerning events that confronted societies. The richness of these cartoons reflects in turn the vibrance of freedom of the press of expression that societies enjoy. Now, these cartoons were explored in specific books and called Philippine cartoons, which was published in 1985. Its political caricature of the American era, 1901 to 1941, by American author Alfred McCoy and Filipino journalist Alfredo Roses. So, tingnan natin anong laman ng book. So, the book actually considered cartoons as artistic propaganda. Political cartoons played a huge role in the American colonization of the Philippines. Prior to the American arrival, many American journalists were actually so eager, actually present the Philippines or portrayed Philippines in a very negative light. Now, this book actually tackles this cartoon. tackles the political cartoons published in local newspaper and magazine at the time of the occupation of the United States in the Philippines. Now, aside from the fact na kailangan nila ito for their work kasi mataas yung demand para sa mga cartoonists during this time. Now the author of the book, Alfred McCoy, he is an American historian. He earned his PhD in the History and Philippine Studies in Yale University, one of the best university in America and in the world na nakafocus sa Southeast Asia. The book main points. The book contains cartoons from various dialects that thoroughly ridicule the transformation of the country, especially its capital city or certain respect. Negative portrayals of Philippines, Manila, and Filipinos American point of view, satirical representation of rural Filipinos. The cartoons picked by the authors were reviewed based on the reflection of the social condition of the Filipinos, realist view of Americans. We have this equal works and equal salary. Why? Yan yung title. Equal work and equal salary. Why? This one is from The Independent, published in its November 29, 1915 issue. And dyan sa cartoon na yan, makikita nyo na may Filipino teacher, maestro Filipino, and American teacher, maestro Americano. During that time, teacher are called maestro. Pag babae, maestra. So, the cartoon tried to express frustrations with the discrimination on Filipino labor. The next one, ang title nito ay Tanong na Makahulugan. It's between Uncle Sam. This cartoon colonial relationship of US and Filipino satirist portrayed the American as uncaring and rude and with contempt. And that's all for lesson 5. Thank you.